Hey you guys, Ricky here with an editing tutorial talking about geometry, shapes, and photo critique. I found this old photo I took in Boston and this worked great for geometry. I actually found this challenge, or this photo prompt to be quite challenging, mostly just because it takes a next level type of intention that goes beyond creativity and is more technical, which is fantastic, of course. It's something that I would like to be more mindful of. And so when I came across this photo and looking for ideas for this prompt to share with you, I was really struck by this image, and especially as we're transitioning from late summer to fall, and I just thought this would be a good one to share with you. So I just edited this. I haven't touched these pictures, unfortunately, at least not in their entirety since this trip. So I just went through and I edited it, and I was like, this might be a good option to try to talk about for editing and photo critique. So I wanted to reset it here. This is what I took. You can see there's beautiful, this is probably some late afternoon light, and I was just walking through Boston on foot and just taking pictures of everything. I was completely enamored. It was just such a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And oh my gosh, in the fall, I mean, you can't even go wrong with how wonderful it is. So I'm just going to go through kind of my regular edits here, and then kind of play with a little bit more of the tone curve features, which I know I've had a lot of questions about, and talk about the geometry and shapes as well as feedback. I recently shared the critique feedback list on my photography group Facebook page, and we've been talking a lot about giving more structured feedback to help kind of guide the creative process, and just to help kind of figure out like what's working, what's not in photos. So yeah, I like I said, I found the geometry for this week's prompt really challenging. I've actually been researching it for a couple weeks, and I did not find a lot of like truly viable inspiration, and that's frustrating because the internet is such a broad resource, so to not find what you're looking for is always kind of astonishing. But I did find some things, and I really didn't want it to be as obvious as like all urban photography or all macro photography, which is what a lot of what I found. And so I wanted to try to show a combination of the two of, oh, you know what? every time I hit that tone curve, I start realizing where the colors are off, and it always goes back to lens correction. So let's take care of that real quick. Yeah, so I couldn't find the inspiration that I wanted to take something that wasn't so obvious. Now here I am editing in urban photo, and you're like, well, come on, like that's as geometry and shapes as it gets. And I agree with you, but I really like the photos, so I was gonna roll with it. I did share others on the Facebook page and on my post that was better attuned to just a little more variety. I found like just square windows. There's a lot of texture in nature and patterns, which I unfortunately had already shared a lot of, so I didn't want to duplicate a lot of those images, but I did get pretty inspired. I just wanted to make sure that I was sharing different photos. I didn't get a chance to go out and shoot in the city for these, so that was a part of it. But I found like patterns and textures, light and color, which is not super narrow, but it is all very inspiring, all very worthwhile for finding shapes and geometry. It was really interesting because like geometry and shapes are always in our photos. We just don't always realize it. And so taking a creative person and forcing them to be just so mindful of something like, I mean, we're already talking about composition and leading lines and patterns and the light and just the overall composition of like, oh, now you need to throw in shapes. Like, let's look at shapes. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. It was really overwhelming. So I'm sure that at least one of you can relate to that. And then I found Henry Cartier. Please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing his name very well. I'm not French, but he is a French photographer whom I've known about for many a year, but I haven't really looked into his work a lot. And I was looking through his photos because he was known for like studying geometry and really like finding creative and less obvious ways to document that. And that's exactly what I'm always looking for. Like, I'm looking for the less obvious way to do the obvious thing. And I like that the most. So I found him to be the most inspiring photographer I could find. Every other photographer I found was just too obvious, too dramatic. And I did share some that I liked, but for the most part it was very challenging. So to go from that now, let's talk a little bit about photography critique. And I can't stress enough how important getting feedback on your photography is, especially if you're trying to take your photography seriously. That can mean a number of things. So let's preface this by saying that it is really hard to hear constructive criticism on any photo you take, especially because your default is going to be like, oh, well, I like that anyway. But it's to a degree that is acceptable, and then you get to a point where, you know, like, sure, you can like it, but is it helping you to be stubborn and say you like it, even if it's actually something that you could improve upon? So I find myself doing this a lot, and I want to make sure that I'm not pushing that onto anybody else, and that I'm being as open-minded as I hope that my photography students are. So take that for what it is, and you know, I think, like, not only do like, you're asking me to critique your photos, but I also want you to be critiquing photos, because you're going to then learn exactly what you're looking for, exactly what it means to find various points of interest, different photography elements that I'm telling you, like, hey, your composition's off, or hey, you know, this is something we need to work on, or this is what I like and don't like. And it takes me only a few minutes. Like, I can look at any photo, and in just a couple minutes I can tell you exactly what I like and don't like about that photo. And after, you know, a few years of teaching, I can tell you, you know, what about those photos I don't like. Now, that takes an effort. Don't get me wrong. When I first started this, it took me quite a while to really understand what those things meant, or you know, not feel like I was being a complete jerk. And basically finding the value in offering critique. And what I've learned is that, like, what could I have done better in this photo? Well, we see that there's a building and lamps here, so I could have gone wider. Now, obviously I was traveling, so I didn't have a wider lens, and this was obviously my focal point. I like that it's centered, so it's kind of rule of thirds. There's interest here, then there's a foreground framing. There are things I could do differently. I'm personally so happy with this. It's my photo, so naturally I would be. And many photographers are going to feel that way, but it doesn't mean that I'm not open or receptive to hearing about what you think I could have done differently. Do you think maybe I should have put this in the right third of the frame, like fully to the right or fully to the left for different interest levels? Should I put this in the top of the frame instead of toward the center, so that you could have seen more below and less of the trees? There's so many different components that you can really pull out, and it's always going to be based on the viewer, right? Every time it's going to be based on the viewer, and it's really a matter of how attuned your eye is to how attuned your eye is to the art, to the skill level of photography, of aesthetics, of trends, of the classical elements in visual arts that that really carry you through and give you basically I'm not sure what the word is here I'm thinking of, but gives you value to your word behind your critique, right? So if I'm going to critique your photo, I mean, I would hope that I'm doing it with experience and knowledge, and I'm not just saying, oh, that's good or that's bad, or oh, this or that. I'm telling you based on like, well, these are the photography components that are working and these are what's not working. So I've offered a feedback checklist, and to not only see that applied to your imagery is helpful, but I also want to see you applying that to other people's photos, and that way you can learn really how to get and receive feedback, and just understand that it's not easy in either instance. If you want to give me feedback on this, I'm perfectly happy with that, and I do want to say, because I am an artistic, passionate, sensitive person, that it is always important to give feedback, and to do so with utmost mindfulness and tact as possible, because it's not easy for anybody to give or get feedback for that matter. I'm often asked, you know, can you give me feedback on this? So I'm like, yeah, I absolutely could, but that doesn't mean it's easy to do, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Art is so subjective, it's so personal, and that's the hardest part. And no two, like, you could have a million photos of the same thing and no two are going to be the same. I can edit this photo 100 times and it will probably not be the same every time, which is a hard thing. How do you critique that? How do you take that? Do you think that any great artist in history could paint the same painting twice? Well, maybe. What about modern painters? Probably not, because we're so attuned to quick art, and we do things, even if we take time, right? It's been years since I took this photo, and since I'm finally finishing it, it takes time, it really does, and you have to train your eye, and I could come back to this time and again, and I would never edit it the same. I would never take this photo the same way, hard as I try. You know, we're just not the same person, and, you know, the art that you put out is very much affected by the person that you are, and, you know, all those intimate details. So I would love to hear what you think of this photo, what you think about giving and receiving feedback, how comfortable you are. Are you ready to? Are you truly ready to accept it? You know, what could I help you with to improve? And you know, accepting feedback is how you're going to get better. It's encouraging you to be challenged, accepting a different level of your art, and just putting yourself out there, which is what helps you always, of course, get better. So, you know, whenever I personally offer feedback or critique, I'm doing it with all of the love in my heart. You know, I know it sounds like pretty, but like, I'm truly telling you what I love based on, like, I want you to get better. This is what I see you could improve upon. And so it's just something to keep in mind, and I hope that every time that you offer somebody feedback that you're thinking that exact same way. Like, I love this piece, and here's how I think you could do, this is what I think you're doing great, and this is how I think you could do better. It's not like, this sucks and that's all I have to say. And I find myself doing that because I tend to be a really fast thinker and really passionate about what I'm doing. It's not a great skill, to be perfectly honest with you. I would never do that to an artist to their face. So that should not be a habit I ever get into otherwise. So anyway, I want to encourage you to work on your feedback, to understanding how it works, and how to accept it as well as give it. So I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you in the next video.